Hi, this is Jeff Blauette, Cooperative Farmers Elevator Technical Agronomist, and on this week's Field Friday segment, I thought we'd kind of look in kind of a little bit of a retrospect here on this late bean spraying season, and some of the things that I think might show up here probably in the near future that we're going to have to be aware of and understand. Mainly talking about water hemp control. We had obviously a lot of rain that delayed our herbicide applications for the most part into late June, but more likely into July, where we normally want to be done by the 1st of July. In a lot of cases, we weren't even starting until then with all the weather that came through. So what's that done to us? And why do we talk about managing water hemp in programs like we do herbicide-wise? So obviously water hemp, we all know it grows really fast. It's tough to control. It puts a lot of pressure on any herbicide program. But you know, we've gone from the old days when we used to use a lot of the flat fan nozzles. Coverage was important. Obviously, we used a lot of those for a lot of years. Well, then we kind of migrated to everything being in the Roundup system. And in the Roundup system, we really weren't so worried about coverage as much. We went to the AI and some of the larger droplet type nozzles. Worked fine. Systemic herbicides, you don't really need to have a lot of extra coverage. Systemics will translocate to the growing points on their own. You don't need every little surface area portion of that leaf and that growing point covered. Obviously Roundup is not as effective as it once was. So we're going back to some of the older style of herbicides, the stuff that we were kind of went towards Roundup, and now we're going back to, in soybeans we're looking at basically the burners, the Cobras, the Flex Stars, the Avalanche Blazer type stuff. Coverage herbicides exclusively. They contact and kill what they cover. So we're trying to get you guys, and we're doing it on our sprayers as well, going back to the flat fan nozzles. They drift more, you've got more finer droplets, more driftable particles, but we have to use that type of a system to get these control systems to work as best as we can. That makes it a challenge. The plant style of water hemp really makes it difficult with as many growing points and as fast as they grow to get adequate coverage, especially in a bean canopy. In some cases with good sized bean plants kind of help and protect some of those lower growing points on that water hemp. So I thought let's look at some plants and what it looks like after the application, and some good and some not so good results. As we look at these water hemp plants, you can see this looks like a pretty dead plant. Looks like we did a pretty good job, and it was probably all of 18 to 24 inches. Remarkable how well we did. As we look a little further down, you can see another plant that was probably in that 18 to 24 inch range and a lot of damage to it. But there's going to be growing points that we didn't get enough coverage on to kill. That's going to come back and be peeking through the beans. So you can tell by looking at these plants that we need all the coverage we can get, and that's really difficult when we get into late situations. It's nobody's fault this year. Obviously Mother Nature is the one to blame, and she doesn't want to offer herself up so we can throw darts at her. But that's the way it was this year. There's nothing anybody could have done differently to help that out. There's a reason why the best control mechanism for water hemp in corn or soybeans, and especially soybeans, is we need to do everything we can to keep these plants from even coming up. That's kind of why we've had an increased emphasis the last couple of years on increasing our rates of pre-plant herbicides so we get a longer window of control before they even come up. Getting closer to this bean canopy is what we're really shooting for, because the best herbicide out there yet is still a shaded in canopied field. Doing that higher rate of a pre-plant helps. Coming out there and trying to kill water hemp that's small is also the next step. As some of those do start to break through, or in the event we don't get a pre-plant on because of the weather or something, having that herbicide that we can go out there early with and then have some residual on the post-applied side of things is pretty important too. All of these herbicide labels, I don't care what it is, you're looking at the label saying 2 inches, 4 inches. At the high side, maybe a 6-inch water hemp on the label. Well, obviously there was a lot of water hemp that was much bigger than that this year, and most years there is. If it's up, water hemp can grow so fast in warm weather that we virtually can't control that 6 inches or less all the time. So if we can keep them from coming up, go out there with our post-applied application early, in a lot of cases maybe even before the next flush is coming, stacking some more residual on top of it, again, to try and keep more of them from coming up. That's the best case scenario, and that's why we have had those discussions with a lot of you guys with that systems approach in mind, just so we don't end up with situations that ended up happening this year. Again, it was nobody's fault, but it happened where we've got stuff way too big, and it's just a reminder of why we need to do these things. You know, this is an evaluation of this year, is why we tried to, because I'm afraid in a lot of these fields, they look pretty good now. You're going to start to see, as we saw in those pictures of those burnt water hemp that weren't dead, they're going to start coming through here in another couple weeks, and we're going to wonder what happened. And my guess is a lot of those fields, those water hemp were burnt pretty bad, stunted, but they didn't get killed, and they're going to start popping through the beans, and we're going to have a lot messier fields than we're used to and that we like. But again, there wasn't a whole lot more we can do. We're just going to have to, you know, go into next year and hope we have a better cooperative weather system so we can do the things we want to do. But with that, that's this week's Field Friday segment, and we'll see you next week.